Hello, and welcome back to the Utah Tech Leads Leadership Series. Today, we are joined by Aaron Frost of HeroDevs. How are you doing today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your company.
Yeah, so I'm a family guy. I've got 5 kids. That's too many kids. I'm also a twin, so you might see me around and I don't recognize you. Been in Utah my whole life. Started Hero Devs about 5 years ago. I'm a programmer by trade. Worked at a lot of local companies. Worked for the LDS Church. Worked for Domo. Worked for Progression. Worked for 1-800 Contacts. And then started Hero Devs, and we do consulting for big enterprises, and we also sell software support for the biggest governments and biggest enterprises in the world. So yeah, that's what we do.
That's fantastic. So you said you're a programmer by trade. What kind of drew you into the tech world?
Honestly, one day I was at work, I was doing some accounting support, and I was pretty good at SQL. And one of my managers said, "Hey, have you considered being a programmer?" And I hadn't. And so I just slowly started looking at it, and it was rad. It got me into like the same thing that made me like playing Xbox and video games. That same skill required to be good at video games. For me, it was the exact same skill required to be good at programming. And so it just worked, and I got in, and it's been a good career. So yeah.
That's fantastic. So what are the things, either in the work that you have done or the work that you've seen done, like with regards to leadership, what are some of the qualities that you've seen that you think are the most beneficial?
So I think I'm a reflection of like my lived experiences. And the number one thing I talk about every day at work is, are you safe? Like, are you comfortable? So I think that I've had good examples of extreme unsafety, and I've had examples of like proper safety. And some of them come from, your other partners. Like I could name some if it helps, but some of your partners, like the Utah Tech Leads partners, and they're just good leaders in Utah Tech community, taught me safety, and they taught me how to make people safe. And so I think that's the number one thing that I try and emulate is, hey, are we all safe? If we are, then let's just like then let's get work done. But I think that's kind of the base thing that I try and show my team members at work. HeroDevs has 65 people now, and so I just try to make sure, hey, are we all safe? If we are, then let's get our work done.
It's definitely something that's actually come up quite a bit in interviews with others as well, that safety is just such a the baseline from where you can start and really have creative thought and problem solving and successes in that kind of space. Is that what you've seen at HeroDevs?
Definitely. And in my experience, like I had a job one time at a Utah tech company, unfortunately, where one of the executives, he hit me in the back of the head with his hand. And for a lot of people, that might not be a big deal, but I get triggered on physical hitting just from like childhood. And so I was very unsafe immediately.
Yeah,
And I had to like flee to another job.
absolutely.
And so
That's
I don't know.
understandable.
I just know how I feel when I'm not safe, and it's a lot for me to assimilate. So when I think of Liz, I think of you unsafe. I just get like really concerned, like, hey, I got to fix that because I know how it affects me. And so, yeah, I'm probably projecting my own needs onto other people by focusing on safety so much. But yeah, that is what I focus on a lot.
No, I think that's incredibly, incredibly important. And it's one of those things that I think over the past 30, 40 years, we've learned a lot about in like the hierarchy of needs, right? You can't be successful, you can't be productive unless you feel that baseline safety. It's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, yeah.
So you said that there was a time where you felt a need to flee to a different job. Was that something that you kind of investigated the culture of that job that you went to? Or were you just like, hey, I'm out, I'm not doing this anymore?
Yeah, it was a survival move. Like I went to it ended up being a great place. I met people that, they still change my career every day. but I didn't have time to like find the best place. I just got lucky that I was able to find a spot pretty quick.
Absolutely. And especially in the Utah tech community, it seems like once you make a friend at work, you've made a friend for life. And those kinds of individuals and individual relationships kind of stick with all of us. And we navigate through this world together in a way that I haven't actually seen in other industries. Have you seen a bit of that, either like in networking or mentoring or going through building HeroDevs? Are there people that you've brought on just because you know and you trust them?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think anyone building a company would be silly to not try and bring in the best people from their past. I think that's, anytime you can do that legally without like violating a non-solicit, I think that you'd be weird to not bring in the best people. But yeah, I think we've all bonded around the same needs of, hey, first let's be safe, then let's do something that we like, and let's push leaders up the totem pole as fast as we can together. So yeah.
Absolutely. So what are some of your proudest accomplishments or achievements?
So one big one is my friends and I, there was a technology about 12 years ago that was growing really fast. And of all the places on earth that it was growing the fastest in Utah, like if you went to Google search terms, it was like Utah is freaking out over this technology. And we built a conference around that technology, and Google, the technology was built by Google, and Google was like, hey, you guys are our official conference now. Like, we're going to make you our official Google conference. And I think building a big community is probably around tech was like one of my favorite accomplishments. I worked with good people as we did it. We built it here in Utah, which we've been pressured a lot to move it out of Utah, but we've kept it here and kept the community focus around, hey, this is what Utah Tech can do, which I think has been great. And yeah, that conference is definitely one of the biggest things. It taught me, because let's be honest, Liz, if you've ever done a conference, and have you?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's complete. You think it's just gonna be like this fun little gig, but it's a big deal. And the first few years, people were like, hey, do you guys focus on diversity? And to be frank, I said yes, not knowing what that word meant, to be honest.
Mhm.
Like, just being totally transparent. But by year 3, I was like, I think this word has meaning that we need to pay attention to. Like, we can't say we focus on diversity if we don't even know what it means, and we started focusing on it.
Mhm.
And we got a handle on diversity, but then I think the more important word was we had to focus on being inclusive.
Yeah.
And inclusion became like the top word. I was like, oh man. And then once we got diversity and inclusion as a focus, I'm not going to say we solved it, because I don't know if you've ever solved it. It's a thing you always do. It's a culture rather than like a problem to be solved, right? Once we had that as part of our culture, then we were able to actually focus on safety for everybody, make sure it was safe. So I think that conference, building a community that's hundreds of thousands of people large, is probably one of my favorite accomplishments I've ever done. And then, I mean, outside of tech, I have 5 kids, and they're my 5 favorite people on earth. So I would also say that's one of my other favorite accomplishments. But yeah.
Well, I have 2 questions directly related to that. So let's how do you balance your personal and your professional life? I know a lot of entrepreneurs, especially people who start as programmers or computer scientists, have a really difficult time turning it off, as you would say. And a lot of times spouses or family just kind of understand that about them, and they find their own balance. So how do you find balance?
I think that I'm in the other category that you described. Like, I feel like you're describing me. Like, I have a hard time turning it off.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if I found balance, to be frank. I'm hoping to hit a level where I'm always chasing a level that I hope I'll be able to get balance once I get there. So I don't know if I'm the best example of balance that you
Oh,
could
don't
use.
worry about that at all. As a millennial, when people say balance, it's one of those like
Yeah.
words that always makes me a little uncomfortable, because I'm like, why would we have ballots? Like, that's not a thing, right? You either go whole hog or you don't go at all. Like, you know, there's, yeah, it's kind of crazy. So what do you see as the biggest challenges that we face as a community in Utah and in the tech community kind of over the next 10, 15 years?
I think it's the same as everyone else, largely, where um, people are trying to legislate their own personal morals. And I do think that that threatens business largely. To give you an example, like that conference is a really good example. People fly in from all around the world and mostly from all around the United States. And these are leaders in tech that are flying here for that conference. The conference will generate in a week, it'll generate easily for the Utah area, $10 million easily.
Mm-hmm.
But we have attendees that can be pregnant when they get here. And our laws that have changed just from one day to the next without input from the people, but only from, I think, a narrow portion of the politicians, they've put my conference attendees at risk, which means our conference is being forced to move out of Utah, which makes us really uncomfortable. We don't want to leave Utah, but we feel obligated to leave for the safety of the attendees that would have to be put in an unbearable decision due to, like, let's say they just fall down the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to make a horrible decision, but in Utah, they wouldn't be afforded the right to make that decision, which that's not okay. Right.
Yeah.
And so we're being forced to, I think people legislating morals will continue to make companies not choose Utah. And I'm being affected by that, like being dragged to another place by association. And so I think that tech needs to have a louder voice and say, hey, our values are on being inclusive. That includes LGBTQ community, that includes women, that includes the rights of other people that we don't represent well here in Utah, you know, and that's different than I think the morals that people are trying to legislate, unfortunately. So I think our biggest risk is being legislated into a world that tech won't accept and turning into a state that tech won't embrace anymore.
Kind of like a battle of values when it comes down to it. They're not always reflected in each community in that kind of balanced perspective. A lot can get lost in translation, and a lot can get lost in experience, where you have this thing that's like one of your most proud moments and something that you're able to do and generate over time and build a community in Utah around. You now have to take somewhere else because of that conflict, for sure. I totally understand that.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because, you know, I think we're all, no matter how fed up we get, anyone who was born and raised in Utah, we're all kind of Utah first. Like, we all enjoy reading Utah's best in the nation at X. Like, we all get that. But when Utah's not great anymore, like, that sucks. And so, yeah, and I'm being swept up by that. So I would say tech needs to be louder at, this is what will drive businesses in tech to Utah. And we need to get better at unifying that voice for the politicians, because at the same time, I don't think that politicians they wake up and go, let's ruin tech. You know, obviously they're not bad people. They're making decisions that have adverse effects. And we're not doing a good enough job at telling them, hey, the thing you're doing, I know it's coming from the right place in your heart, but it will have these effects. And I need you to understand those effects before you make the decision. So we got to get better at telling them where we're coming from, because they may have a little bit of hope that they may make different decisions if they understood where we were coming from.
Absolutely. And I mean, protecting the business community is a very, very big part of the value statement when it comes to our elected officials, for sure. So is that one of the reasons that you joined UTL? And like, how has UTL kind of helped you voice the things that you're the most concerned about?
I joined it because tech needs to have a better voice, and I'm feeling the squeeze. So you and Sonny show up and say, hey, we need to do better. I'm like, yeah, you're telling me, dude, I'm in the middle of this, like, yeah, help me help you, like, tell me what I gotta do to help. And you have, since joining, I feel like, helped me go, okay, Frost, here's how you would have a bigger voice. And you've got me involved with the people on the Hill. And I went to Tech on the Hill day and got a chance to sit on the Hill when, like, honestly, it was, I don't know if it was irony or providence or just pure serendipitous, like, pain, that I was on the floor when they voted to really do a not great thing for trans children in Utah and families of trans children. I'm just like, this is, being here for this vote is, it's actually kind of rad watching how democracy works, not just in Utah, but in the country. And then, but also realizing this is going to make my fight worse. Like, this is going to make, this worsens my leverage to keep this conference here. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's one of those times that I feel like awesome. People think awesome is like, oh, that's so cool. And it's like, no, you're actually in awe of something that's happening, good or bad. You are in awe of the experience that's around you. And it can be really crazy and really emotionally difficult for sure.
And even though it wasn't how I would have wanted the day to go, I was sitting there with a politician that I went to high school with. We played football together, and I was like, hey, just so you know, I wouldn't vote the way you're voting, but I understood the words that came out of your mouth. I understand why you're voting that way, and I can respect it. I want you to say the same thing back to me, that you understand why I don't want you to vote that way. And he's like, I understand why you don't want me to vote that way. And I'm like, okay, cool. At least we had the dialogue, which is better than I might expect. Certainly when I look at other states and some of the weird dialogues that are happening in their chambers, right? So yeah, and you did that for me. Like, the UTL got me involved in that, and I wouldn't have been able to have been involved without you. So that's why I got involved, and that's kind of the value I've personally gotten from being a part of it.
Well, we love having you involved. So last question, if you could talk to an itty bitty version of yourself long before you chose your professional career, what would you tell that person?
Oof. I would say, hey, you're not as incapable of success as people taught you or when you're little. And you should like reach high and not judge yourself as unworthy. You're definitely worthy of the success that you think you could get. So that's what I would say. And as I've actually had a chance to go talk to high school students, and I've shared with them what I would say. And what I would say to that, Aaron, is what I've told them. And that is that the adults in the room don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And what you want, that's what you need to go do. Because the adults, even though we got wrinkles and stuff, we don't know either, man. We're just making it up too. So
Yeah, we play adults on TV.
yeah. But if I could go back to the teenage Aaron who thought he was just destined to sell pest control or run a pest control business because of some weird interview from high school, I would just say, hey, dude, those adults don't know what they're talking about. Go big, go all the way. And you're capable of everything that's out there. You just got to decide to do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time and your leadership in the community. We really, really appreciate your voice and your concerns and your ability to eloquently display them and the impact that it has on Utah. We really, really appreciate it for sure.
Thanks for all that you do. Thanks for guiding people like me into a way to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. See you.